and welcome back. I've recently been talking to my students about cross-hatching and stippling, which are ways to create value using a pen and ink. And so what I'll be demonstrating is how to create a 1" by 5" gradient using cross-hatching. And then we will shade a circle with the strategy of stippling, which will help turn it into a 3-dimensional sphere. First, you'll need a ruler, a pen, a pencil, and then any circle that's a decent size that you can trace. Don't make it too big or the stippling will be frustrating, but something that's not too enough of a challenge at least. For a younger beginning artist, I would think of maybe a circle that's about 1" to 1¼ in diameter. And then for artists that are more confident or had more practice, a circle like this, it's maybe 2 inches or even a little more. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to create our 1" by 5" gradient, and we're going to start with a rectangle. So I usually start with pressing lightly with my pencil with the bottom line, that's 5 inches, and then I add 2 1" lines going up. I'm not too concerned about them being perfectly up and down either. And then once you have those, you're going to connect them up top. And then we're going to divide this rectangle into 1" squares. So I'm just going to make little dashes going across the bottom. And then the same thing along the top. And then we'll connect those dashes to make the individual squares themselves. And then we will trace the placement of where we'd like our circle to be. And so now I have a nice kind of self-made worksheet to practice on. And so we're going to start with our first square on the left, and I'm going to shade dark to light going to the right. And we'll even try to zoom in a little bit on this today. And so with cross-hatching, you're creating parallel lines that cross over each other and create darkness or value. And the light or darkness of your drawing is influenced by how far apart or closer together those lines are and how many layers of lines you create. So this will be my darkest square and this will be my lightest square. And I'll start with some diagonal parallel lines going across, managing the space in between, trying to keep it regular, not feeling rushed, but just taking my time. And if you can kind of create a rhythm for yourself, it can be a pretty soothing activity. And then I'll turn my paper to draw my lines going in the other direction. And then I'm going to put a third layer of lines just going straight across from top to bottom. And you can see the shape starting to fill in with a lot more darkness or darker value. And then I'm going to go perpendicular to those lines straight across. And that will be our fourth and final layer for this square. So that completes my first square that had 4 layers of lines on it. So the next square is going to be a little bit of a lighter value, and I'll start out with the same type of lines, similar amount of space in between, maybe a little bit more. Really slowing down. Trying to work on that control. And it's okay if you shake a little bit. Sometimes the more we focus on being steady, the more we shake. That's okay. I'm going to turn my paper and go the same direction as I did with layer number 2 on the first one. Let's unzoom. There we go. Sometimes I have a little less steadiness with that first layer, and then the second layer I seem to have sometimes more confidence, or having the lines already to stare at helps me focus. And we'll put a third layer, just like last time. Just kind of spacing them out a little bit more so it's not quite as dark. So there should be a noticeable difference between the first square and the second square. And so there's 3 layers on this square. And then our third square will start the same way as before. But we're going to space these out quite a bit more.
I'm going in the same direction again as we did with layer number 2 and the other 2. Keeping those lines separated. And a little bit more space in between.
And then maybe putting another third layer on these. And then we'll do, that was with 3 more layers again, but as you can see, we just put a little bit more space in between. And then we'll do our third square.
And going across one more time.
So that has 2 layers, and then we'll do the same for this one, but space things out a wee bit more. And so that has 2 layers as well. So this is using crosshatching, where we've reduced the number of layers from 4 to 3 to 2, and then we've also increased the amount of space between those lines to create a lighter value as well. So next we'll move on and use stippling to shade this circle and make it look like a sphere. Stippling is when we use many dots, and the dots, based on how much space we put in between the dots, much like how much space we put in between the lines, crosshatching, is what dictates how dark or light an area is going to be. If you have a small area crowded with dots, it's going to be darker, and if you have a bigger area where your dots are spread out, that area is going to be lighter. And so much like when I shade with a pencil, the first thing I like to do is establish where my light source is coming from, which means that the arrow is indicating that light is shining down from the upper left, and that means the area of my circle or sphere that's closest to the light source is going to be the lightest, and the area furthest away is going to be the darkest. Now, to help myself out at first, I like to draw a small oval shape with a pencil very faintly. And that reminds me this should be the very lightest part of my circle, which means it will have the fewest amount of dots. And then from there, I use curved lines because we want to describe a sphere. And if our lines go straight across or our dots go straight across, it'll flatten the shape out. So a curve will help describe that illusion of a 3-dimensional form. And so these lines just kind of help me see how far or close I'm getting away from the lightest area, and just sort of help me kind of track and decide when I should start spreading my dots around further. And so, excuse me, to get started, I like to work in the darkest area first. And so I'm just going to hug the inside of my line for my circle and just start carefully spreading dots around and keeping them close together because this is going to be the darkest part. And I will anticipate adding more dots later as I work on sort of the fine-tuning transition of my dark to light area. And I like to start maybe even by just making a line of dots on that edge so I know where the edge of my shape is. And just kind of, much like when I shade with a pencil, I'm just kind of going back and forth across the shape in a curved line. And I'm spreading those dots ever so lightly. And so as you can see, this is a pretty time-consuming activity, but it has a tremendous textural effect the way that the value transitions. So if you would like to start shading your own circle, I'll meet you at the end. And so as you can see, by managing the space in between my dots, I've created the effect or illusion that this is a round shape with a shadow on it by crowding all my dots here and making this area darker and spreading my dots out more on the other side closest to the light source. So to review, we've practiced cross-hatching and we've practiced stippling to create a gradient of value either on a three-dimensional object or on a flat gradient. And now you can practice this when you're illustrating faces or drawing shapes, and it's just a unique way to add a specific texture or feeling to your drawing, especially if you are limited to just utensils for ink, where applying pressure doesn't have the effect it would with a pencil. I hope you enjoyed this activity, and until next time, keep drawing. Bye.